activated.
Hello, I'm Etheridge Grant. My friends call me Jim. I was the commanding officer of the USS William B. Preston on February 19, 1942, the day war came to the shores of Australia. I'm here to share my story and the stories of others from that fateful day when Darwin came under attack, right here where you are sitting. My ship, the Willie B, as we call her, was a seaplane tender. We escorted up to 6 Catalina seaplanes and patrolled the coastline, bays, and inlets in northern waters looking for signs of the enemy or suspicious activity. The Willie B was like a mothership to the Catalinas, enabling them to operate at sea by providing a base from which to refuel, living quarters for the air crews, and shelter from the enemy. The Willie B had a standard crew of 125 men. But that number swelled in size when tendering the Catalinas, which had up to 9 crew members each. The Willie B started life as a destroyer. She was converted into a seaplane tender by removing 2 of her 4 boilers and funnels, modifying her weapons capability, and installing an aviation fuel tank. Extra living space for the seaplane crews was created. 2 30-foot motor launches were added for refueling purposes, and plane refueling booms were installed on each quarter deck. The transformation was made complete when she was redesignated from destroyer D-344 to high-speed seaplane tender 7. We were stationed in the Philippines when I received a dispatch from the Admiral in Manila at 0300 on December 8, 1941, stating,
quote, "Japan has commenced hostilities. Govern yourself accordingly."
I immediately gave orders to darken the ship and implement the codes and ciphers which were to apply upon the commencement of hostilities. I doubled the lookouts and belted up more ammunition for our anti-aircraft battery. I also took down the Willie B's white awnings, which had been lifesavers in the tropical heat, and moved her further away from the seaplane so that any bomb directed at the ship would not damage one of the Catalinas. I received orders to head to Darwin, Australia, and arrived at the beginning of January 1942. For a small frontier town in northern Australia, Darwin had rather good port facilities. The people were very friendly and warmly welcomed the United States Allied Forces. We continued our reconnaissance missions from Darwin, scouting the Dutch East Indies, which is now known as Indonesia. On one occasion, we were patrolling an area around Sulawesi and entered the inner harbor of Kendari through a narrow and winding channel. This inner harbor was ideal for our seaplane operations, but not for the Willie B itself, as there was little room to maneuver should the ship come under attack. To protect the ship, I brought her alongside a steep and thickly wooded embankment and secured her to trees on the beach, with anchors laid bow and quarter to hold us off. We then camouflaged the ship from stem to stern with palm tree and other foliage, lashing plants to the smokestacks and strewing the decks with fronds. Our camouflage was tested when some enemy fighter planes appeared. The Catalinas were out on patrol. The Japanese spotted the mooring buoys in the bay and headed our way. We held our breath as they flew at less than 100 feet over us. It was quite a temptation for some of the more trigger-happy crew, but I'd given the orders not to fire unless we were attacked. There was a collective sigh of relief as they passed without detecting us. We remained on high alert until we returned to Darwin. Mind you, we attracted some attention on our return as there were still a few palm fronds atop the ship's antenna and smokestacks. It's vital that a ship is able to maneuver during an attack. A stationary ship is a sitting duck. Speed, open water, and the ability to zigzag to try and avoid bombs are essential. Therefore, I put my own protocols in place to ensure the Willie B was attack ready, including rigging the anchor, so that just one link could be knocked off, causing the anchor to fall into the sea and setting the ship free, and keeping her engines running in daylight hours so that she could get underway quickly. On the morning of February 19, 1942, I left the ship in command of my executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Lester Wood, and I went ashore to meet with the American consulate and arrange for the Willie B to be reprovisioned. Around 09:55, the bridge watch on the Willie B issued the warning, "Large formations of planes approaching." The ship went to general quarters and battle stations were manned. Because of the protocols I put in place, Lieutenant Wood was able to get the Willie B quickly underway within minutes, and commenced zigzagging through the crowded harbor, heading for open sea. The crew were aggressively defending the ship, with anti-aircraft fire forcing some of the Japanese pilots to keep their distance, but others pressed through. About 4 bombs exploded just off the Willie B's bow, the concussion breaking bridge windows. 4 Japanese planes commenced dives toward her, but pulled out due to the Willie B's intense machine gun action. Bombs rained indiscriminately on the port area. The destroyer USS Peary, slower in getting underway, was enveloped in bomb splashes as Japanese accuracy marked the ship for destruction. Heavily hit, the Peary rapidly became a burning inferno as bomb after bomb tore the ship apart. It wasn't long before she sank by the stern, her guns firing to the end. Then, the Willie B received a direct hit just forward of the after deck house, right in an ammunition rack. I lost 14 of my men with that single bomb, and others were wounded. The Willie B lost forward steering control and her rudder was jammed. Lieutenant Wood conned and steered the ship using her engines as rudders as he made for an opening in the submarine defense boom at the mouth of Darwin's harbor. As he struggled to regain control of direction, he narrowly missed the bow of the Australian hospital ship, Menunda, which was on fire, having been hit by an attacking bomber. All this time, the Willie B's machine guns maintained fire on every Japanese plane within range. Several turned their attention to the Catalinas, plowing a path of bullets across the water directly at them. 2 of our Catalinas caught fire, with dense columns of black smoke streaming upwards. The air crew were in the water trying to avoid the bullets that were being fired at them when suddenly a U.S. Kitty Hawk appeared, and despite the state of his badly damaged aircraft, the pilot headed for the Catalinas to protect the men and took aim at the Japanese Zeros. He diverted their fire toward him, but eventually had to bail out of his disabled plane. The Zeros continued to fire at him as he parachuted toward the mangroves. Desperate to get back to my ship and crew, I made my way to the wharf. Securing a small boat, I set course for the Willie B, which was still struggling to regain steerage, but was making some headway toward the harbor entrance. The transport ship, Neptuna, was in serious trouble, burning in several places. She was moored alongside the wharf and had been in the process of having her sizable cargo of ammunition unloaded when the attack occurred. Several brave Australian soldiers were trying to shift the ammunition she carried to a safe distance, but their efforts were in vain as the bow of the ship exploded. The force of the blast reverberated across the harbor, blowing me into the water and causing burning material and red-hot metal to fall towards me. The Australian corvette Katoomba was immobile, trapped in the floating dry dock with her crew still on board. She was a sitting duck, but her crew defended her valiantly, manning the machine guns and taking up .303 rifles to shoot at the attacking planes from whatever position they could. She was showered with debris from the Neptuna explosion. Her gun crew at the 12-pounder escaped one near miss when a piece of metal landed inches away, smashing a piece of decking. Thanks to the crew's spirited defense, Katoomba appeared to be unscathed, but other ships weren't so lucky. Nearby, the Australian troopship Zealandia was on fire and was slowly sinking by the stern. The tanker British Motorist was also on fire and capsizing. At least another 5 ships were sinking. It was a scene of utter destruction, desperation, and death. Madly trying to avoid the debris raining down on me, I dove deep into the water in the hope that the further I went, the cooler the metal would be before it struck me. I could hear the hissing sounds as the hot metal hit the water, but somehow I managed to avoid being hit. I was being pulled by the strong current of the ebb tide toward oil burning on the water. Again, luck came to my aid as I drifted by a rather large mooring buoy and was able to catch the line trailing from it. I hauled myself hand over hand toward it and tried to climb on top. I couldn't make it, as it was about 3 feet above the water and rather slick. So I just held on, tying the line around my waist. I saw the Willie B crippled and still smoking at the stern, slowly making her way out the harbor, escaping the inferno of a shattered and ruined Darwin. Even while I was congratulating Lieutenant Wood on doing a good job in my head, it gave me rather a lonely feeling to see my ship leaving while I was hanging onto a buoy in the middle of the bay. A second wave of bombs started falling with the return of the Japanese. Certain private parts of my anatomy were rather subject to the concussion of the bombs as they hit the water. So whenever I'd see a bomb heading in my direction, I'd pull myself as far out of the water as I could. I spent a couple of hours in the water avoiding the burning oil, bombs, and strafing, but when the tide slackened, I was eventually able to swim to shore. I reached a small pier, but I couldn't pull myself up as I was so tired. I just hung there until I caught the attention of some men who helped me. When I looked back, I saw the mooring buoy that I'd been clinging to get hit by exploding ammunition off the Neptuna, and I thought how lucky I was that that hadn't happened earlier. I made my way back to the American consulate's office, only to find that everyone had evacuated. The office itself had been bombed and was a wreck. But they hadn't forgotten me. I found a note attached to one of the desks saying that if I survived and should return, I was to please take charge. Only problem was that I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to take charge of. Several members of our Catalina crew, who had been rescued after their Catalina was strafed and sunk, also made their way to the consulate's office. Imagine their surprise when they found that I was the new American consul. That was just the beginning. A fateful day for Darwin, which cemented Australia's place in the history of World War II. Over 200 Japanese aircraft attacked the harbor, the Air Force Base, aerodromes, and the town that day, killing 235 Allied service personnel and civilians and wounded 300 more. Darwin was air raided around 60 more times, impacting areas as far south as Catherine, some 300 kilometers away, and continued to be a key strategic base for the Allied forces for the duration of the war. It was the first and largest single attack ever mounted by a foreign power on Australia. The raids were planned and led by the same Japanese commander responsible for the attack on Pearl Harbor 10 weeks earlier on December 7th, 1941.
Commander Grant remained in Darwin, presumably performing the American consulate duties from the 19th to the 21st of February 1942, before rejoining his ship, the USS William B. Preston, in Derby, Western Australia. He was awarded the Legion of Merit with Combat Valour for exceptionally meritorious conduct during operations against enemy Japanese forces in the Pacific War area from December 1941 to May 1942. He retired as a Rear Admiral in 1956. Lieutenant Commander Lester Wood was awarded the Silver Star for handling the USS William B. Preston in a praiseworthy manner and for showing resourcefulness, determination and skill in conducting the ship to safe waters. The pilot of the US Kitty Hawk, Robert F. McMahon, was wounded but landed safely in the mangroves that surrounded the harbour and survived the attack on Darwin. The Northern Territory and Japan have shared a cordial history since this time of conflict. Today, Japan is one of the territory's largest trading partners with a strong economic relationship underpinned by friendship and respect. Other stories about the territory's role in World War II can be discovered around Darwin and throughout the Northern Territory. Information on other attractions, tours and events is available at the local Visitor Information Centre.